Hey, welcome back to Album April. It's April 10th, and today listen to Exile in Guyville by Liz Phair. Fate has kept us in the 90s for another day with another female rocker. But while Alanis Morissette represented a more polished mainstream version of this sound, Liz Phair was thoroughly an indie darling. She was such an indie darling that when she tried to go a little bit more mainstream for her fourth album, the critics and fans turned on her in such an extreme way that they would actually go on to apologize for it later. Exile in Guyville was her first album, and it was released in 1993. So what was my first impression of the album? Okay, well, if we're talking about two different sides of this sound, the Jagged Little Pill side, which is a lot more polished and mainstream, and this, which is a lot more raw and real, I 100,000% prefer the more polished version. I did not like this album very much. It's kind of like the same issue I had with Blue, where, I could tell this is somebody's vibe, just not mine. According to Liz Phair, she was sort of playing a character while doing these songs. They're not really about experiences that she's had. She's kind of posing as someone in a scene that she respects and wants to be in. And to her credit, you could have fooled me on that regard because there's nothing about this that comes off as fake. On the contrary, some of the songs come off as a little too bitter, a little too personal, a little bit too much information. I mean, I guess that's fine in the context of this album because you're not really actually looking at someone's dirty laundry. This is all made up, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't feel uncomfortable sometimes. The feeling that I got when listening to the song Flower on this album is the most uncomfortable I've been so far in Album April. Usually themes of sexuality from female singers are sort of a teasy, tee-hee implication kind of way. That is as far removed from that as possible. But then there's also the fact that a lot of these songs just aren't very catchy, and I didn't really enjoy myself listening to them all that much. There were a few songs that had hooks to them. Probably the only real single from this album is Never Said. But even that does not sound very mainstream at all. It made me really appreciate how many pop hooks there were in Jagged Little Pill. My favorite song on the album was Shatter, which started out, it's I think the longest song on the album. It starts out, the first half of it is an instrumental, and then the rest of it is lyrics of feeling the need to be better for someone else, or even regretting the way that someone has lived their lives now, seeing how someone else is living theirs. Maybe? I don't know. Some of these lyrics are kind of hard to catch. I also thought that Canary was pretty good. As for the songs I didn't like, Flower is absolutely my least favorite song on the album, no question about it. Most of them I just didn't really care for. They weren't really my thing. I didn't like Dance of the Seven Veils. But for most of the time listening to this album, I was having the same feeling I had listening to Blue, which is wow, if I had different tastes, I would be lapping this up. And then the final question. If you're asking me whether or not I liked this album, I would say that I did not like this album overall. But as for the question of does this album hold up, I am not the right person to be answering that question, because this album isn't for people like me. I like pop songs, I like catchy, hooky songs, I like production, stuff like that. This is very out of my element. And I can't even relate to teenage angst or anything like that because this is not a teenage feeling album at all. It all comes off as very adult. Liz Phair was, I believe, in her late 20s when she was making this. So yeah, for other people it's amazing, but personally it's gonna be a no for me, dog. Alright, I'll see you guys tomorrow.